Looks good to go. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another week. It is Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Got a bunch of things to talk about. A lot of things have happened in this course and others, but before we get there, I made a huge omission last time, and I must apologize. So this is off of University of Toronto Engineering News, talking about Flatten, the organization of students that's making of students and advisors making a free online map, as it says. And last time we talked about Martin and Arthur and Jane, which is three members of your class. And I made a huge omission and I did not talk about Rassam Yazdi. So with apologies, Rassam, thank you for being part of the initiative. Thank you for, outreach is not easy, especially when there's a lot of different voices competing for attention. So it's a pretty critical piece. So apologies for not bringing it up last time. I should also point out that if you go to outside the U of T engineering community, there's a lot of organizations, a lot of groups that are doing work with respect to COVID-19 and how our community and how our country is going to cope. Your classmates were written up as part of that, which is kind of great. But even if you're not being written up, even if you're just doing small things at a local scale, a family scale, if you've gone and got groceries for your neighbors, that's also incredibly important. So one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit in a moment is there's the temptation to share the big stories, and they're important, and I'm not going to take that away. But the little stories, it's kind of like in business where it's the little small companies, the little small organizations, they're the backbone of the economy. The big companies are important, but so are the little ones. And we want to celebrate both those who are just doing small things like helping out a neighbor and those who are helping out the entire country. Speaking of things that people are doing, Yuzin Komi started this post a while ago, and as you know, I sort of got in there and started doing my glass bowl based cooking, and it's been a lot of fun. And then Quan Shi One showed up, and that was kind of the end of it, because one, significantly better photos, lighting is much better, and then what really took it over the top was the making your own dough to make your own fried filled buns. So that's kind of amazing. And I was just like, okay, I was like, I don't want to post anymore because I can't live up to this. I mean, this is a full on Instagram type thing. And that got me thinking that I think a number of you have expressed concerns that, as you're going through your courses or your praxis in particular, that aren't we going to be looking for the really, really high fidelity prototypes, the really amazing visuals, the really, the stuff that looks great. And our job as assessors is to take a slightly different point of view. And so, here we have an entirely different, and I feel so, it sort of kind of hurt a little bit. Can I come too? Well, yes, because what you're doing is you're adapting to your situation and you're overcoming. And I really want to highlight that although there's a real temptation, whether it's the media, whether it's and sometimes our lectures, to show these really amazing, oh wow, that the oh wow factor, we are responsible as your assessors, as your instructors, as your colleagues for playing down the oh wow and to say, yeah, but look, there's a different oh wow. In the absence of being allowed out of your room, in the absence of so many things, you're still able to adapt and thrive within your situation. So if we go back to what we talked about last lecture about different kinds of prototypes, it's really critical that you don't feel that in the absence of a machine shop, in the absence of all these things, that we're never going to talk about you and you're never going to excel, you're never going to be recognized. That is entirely not what we want. And so if all you have is a pencil and paper, like if that's it, your laptop blows up, I'm not sure how you'll submit, we'll work on that. You sketch, you draw, you make charts, you learn technical drawings, you estimate, you calculate. As a community, engineering and the great engineers of old, we did amazing things using slide rules, pencil, and paper. And so can you, and we will really push ourselves to recognize that given the situation, how have you challenged yourselves? How have you overcome those limitations? That's what we're really looking for. Certainly, we're going to put photos up of the cool stuff because there's there, but we also want to recognize and put photos up of the stuff that you look at and go, it's pretty sketch. Yeah, it's pretty amazing given what was there. So I really wanted to emphasize that. Quick couple points on self-isolation blues. This is the second post in that one. And just to be super clear, physical activity and mental health, the literature is abundantly clear. Last I remember, they were saying that going out and doing regular medium intensity, maybe half an hour activity 3 days a week is as good for you as cognitive behavioral therapy and some of the SSRIs. The relationship between green space and mental health, it's emerging, but there's also a lot of evidence to suggest that getting out and seeing and hearing nature, hearing the birds chirping because it's spring, seeing the plants starting to green, also has a really strong mental health benefit. So the literature suggests that, as was said here, do your push-ups, go up and down the stairs, go for walks, is legitimately good for us. And so, the takeaway of this little piece, and why I wanted to put both this and the food in, is the ideal case for you, because you're engineers, you got to optimize your time. If you can come up with a skill that actually supports performance, you're kind of investing in yourself in multiple ways. It's a win-win. So cooking. I can't say that I weigh less, but I'm certainly spending less on food, and I'm getting a sense of pride in being able to chop vegetables and putting them in glass bowls. Exercise, meditation. So we really encourage you, as you're starting to work through how to learn, how to thrive, how to survive within your new environments, sharing your examples is a win for everybody. 9 o'clock and down, I believe. Not sure what that means, but okay. All right. There was a vote on the continuity plan for 102. You should have all received many, 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 many notifications about this. Couple points based on our consultation. So it was anonymous. It was open to everybody for 48 hours. And for whatever reason, it's called an ungraded survey. So that was the setup. Here's the results. So a couple quick points. I'm not entirely sure what correctly means because there was no correct. So we were not like the correct answer is to accept our plan. I'm also, not sure how we got no answer. So a little weird there, but here's sort of the summary takeaway. 81.4% of those who voted, so, an A minus grade, accepted the continuity plan, which is good. It's not an A plus, but we'll take an A for the moment. Here's my bigger concern. It's an outright F on participation. And my understanding from some sources I've seen is that some students weren't necessarily even aware of what the continuity plan was. So we're a little worried about that because from our point of view, we were pushing and pushing this out, and we're not entirely sure what happened as to why the participation rate was so low. So the vote is done, and certainty is something that I think all of you need, and we'll talk about a little bit of that in a moment. So we don't plan to reopen the vote, but we do want to know what the concerns are so that we can see how to accommodate them within the framework. And some of that happened on Discourse, and we're happy to do that. I had a good Google Hangout chat last night with some teams with a team with concerns, and I think that worked out pretty well. So please approach us as you can. What was the plan? Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit. We'll hide all the stuff that's not relevant. So this is the new plan. Effectively, everything up to beta release stays the same in terms of weight and expectations. And now we have the one pager, the individual presentation on detailed design or verification, and then some weight changes to position statement, handbook. Sorry, position statement stays the same. No, it doesn't. Position statement gets the dual along with handbook and tells feedback. I will say, personally, the whole best of thing, sometimes I don't quite, any aggregate function would work. We could use max, we could use min, we could use, whatever. Why everyone wants to take max and not min, I have some suspicions, but we're going to let that go. What we are going to say, though, is we're making another change. And so I do apologize. We heard that your Tuesday is quite a mess, and Thursday seems to have gotten suddenly a lot messier. It sounds like 159 is figuring out its plan. So we've moved the one pager a little bit later, so another day. So it is now due Sunday 2400 EDT. Keeping in mind, Sunday 2400 is the same as Monday 000. So it's not the start of Sunday, it's the end of Sunday. So just trying to do a little bit of an adjustment there to suit your new circumstances, acknowledging that you would like to know more about the one pager, and Prof. Irish will come in on this in a few minutes. All right, so let's go back. As we said, we when it comes to planning the future of the course, it's an F. When it comes to attending beta or check-ins, it's an A+. We were incredibly impressed um, with the attendance, with people just being there. So we had very, very good numbers. This is the report back from our studio teaching teams. So a couple of quick things, and I believe Professor Sheridan is on the line and may come in on this, but I will continue until I hear. First things first. So studio this week, and as we intend for the next few weeks, is this idea of hang out with your studio teaching team on Google. Um, some of you have requested an alternative time, and if you need one of those times, please arrange it with your studio teaching team. Professor Sheridan, do you want in? I can hear you. All right,
Yeah,
I can.
so
Yep.
now you can. We've had a couple teams get in touch with me. Some of you have not yet heard back from me. That's largely because I'm working behind the scenes to figure out possible options and plans. And I've been doing a lot of liaising with the practice instructors and the studio teaching teams. So if you haven't heard from me, you will hear from me. I think we've almost got to a sense of kind of understanding where everyone is and where all the different teams are.
Okay, I think you're on the wrong slide, but that's okay. Or am I wrong?
It's okay. You can do the next slide really quickly, Foster.
Okay.
The key thing with the check-ins is that we want you to stay checking in with your studio teaching team. They are our greatest resource in understanding how your teams are functioning. So please stay in touch with them.
So as you meet with your studio teaching team this week, the focus is on the one-pager and questions on the remaining assignments. So the one-pager assignment, as you'll hear about momentarily, is up. We're going to talk to it today, and we want to make sure we support you moving forward on that. Our experience has been that the direct sort of face-to-face as much as you can on Hangouts has been a positive, when we hope you're finding that. One thing is we are looking at creating virtual office hours. I think some of the ad hoc interactions that we used to have with Professor Kinnear and myself during studio time and elsewhere. So we'll leave that open as sort of a bit of a pseudo question, but we want to make sure we get to the one pager. So if we do that, we'll share it with you. And that's where something like, in my case, Discord, Blackboard Collaborate, there's a number of choices there. So that's something we're looking at if there's value in it. This is why I thought that I made that point to Professor Sheridan and that about the slide. Challenging times, challenging teamwork. We've been incredibly impressed, but we know that there's always the potential for a challenge. And so we have had some submissions, as Professor Sheridan mentioned, from you. Admittedly, we thought there would be more. And as Professor Sheridan mentioned, we're working through what we've been told in our studio teaching team. We're kind of using them as first point of contact. So just keep us in the loop. Let us know how it goes. Because it's really important from our point of view that you maintain, or we collectively maintain, that class. So I want to take you back in time for a second to the Student Engineer Handbook, because now it used to be worth 20 and now it's going to be worth more. And so you probably want to do a good job. And if you flip through this, and we'll talk about some of these things about personal process and tools, models, and frameworks probably tomorrow or Friday, you might be thinking, I should, maybe some research could help here. If I want to do better, I could do research so that when I look at process and I look at tools, I've got an informed point of view. And if that's too far into the future, well, your detailed design decision or your validation could also probably use some research, because the whole point is credibility and rigor. Hopefully I didn't trigger too many people there. So maybe you go to this Journal of Design Studies that you've heard about, in part because you saw it in lecture at least once before, and you start looking around to say, okay, is there something kind of interesting here? And this is kind of disorganized, and you got stuff that's in press and corrected proof, and you're like, I'd like something a little more organized. So you switch and you say, let's look at the most current volume. You can always go back in time, but we'll take the current volume. And you look around for a little bit, and you see this really cool thing about perceived analogical communication in design teams. And you're like, okay, this could be cool. I'm in a team. And I know sometimes I hear Foster's trying to make these weird analogies, and I try to make weird analogies, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Maybe there's something to this that I can use both in my handbook, but maybe I can use this as I work with my team in the next couple weeks. And unfortunately, you look over here and you're like, purchase? What do you mean purchase PDF? I'm a U of T student. I shouldn't be purchasing anything. All right, so you click through and you see what you get. And okay, I'm still seeing purchase. I don't like this. But you see these highlights. So, use of analogies is important. Receiver's perception is important. And if you can get a common perceived analogy, apparently it reduces conflict in teams and makes for better outcomes. So we've been doing all the talking. We're going to spin it out to you for a little bit. Um, want you to just to think and then share in whatever matter most. I'm watching Discord based on your design team experiences so far. So you've been in a team for a while. You've tried communicating with people face to face, all that. Do you buy this? Yeah, no, maybe, kinda. What are the conditions? What are the qualifiers? Let's take 30 or let's take a minute and a half, and here we go. React. All right, lecture participation. All right, so Professor, I believe Sheridan and Kinnear are on Mattermost. I'm on Discord. We're everywhere. Apparently, I have been. I will come back. I'm going to do a little round. Apparently, I was told there was a student waving outside my window. Hiya. Geez. Okay, onwards. What do we got? High notion of analogy. Third point's a bit questionable. The notion of sense and things making sense. And I think that's let's see. I'm looking at the wrong one. Nothing to eat. Comes down to how pertinent analogies, different messages from the same analogy. I think that makes sense. Um, Focus, people. Where's my Discord? So I think a couple good reactions that I think are really awesome. If you start to get rabbit hole in the sense if you start digging into why that analogy is a useful analogy and what the nature of the analogy is, and the next thing you know, you've introduced your teammates to entire realms of pop culture based on your culture versus their culture, it really can start to take you off topic. Um, and I will say, and again, this is Professor Irish. I think you're gonna, and Professor Sheridan and Kinnear, you're gonna find this one. It's a really good point. Um, Sometimes the analogy starts to make connections that you look at and you're like, I don't think that really connects at all. But to the person making the analogy, it seems absolutely like totally linked. And I think that's a big part of it. Um, I'm pleased that neither Professor Sheridan or Irish have chosen to weigh in on this. Um, Cross culture is a big thing. Diversity is a big thing. These make things more challenging. All right, so I'm going to take it back into our research. Apparently, I can get rights in content. I want to get the content. Let's do this thing. So we go into rights link, and first thing you need to know, it says you have to download an Adobe Content Viewer, make an ID. You're going to pay these people $77.55 Canadian for a PDF that is locked to your identity and can only be read in Adobe. Like, this is so bad. Plus, half the time it doesn't work on Mac OS because Adobe are a bunch of people who don't know how to code properly. So here's the deal. Do not click continue, like ever. You're a U of T student. You're still a U of T student, no matter where you are. You have access. It's this notion of friction. So speaking of analogies, this is hopefully a useful analogy. There's a lot of friction that you have now that you didn't have before. So we talked about uTor VPN, and there were some concerns at the time that it wasn't working. We've now confirmed that you can download the software using the links given, and that it works on Windows and iOS. As you mentioned in the slides, or I mentioned in the slides in lecture 29, I use a slightly different technique that always works. But the VPN is totally working. And so if we go back, this is what you'll see if you go in without the VPN. And I'm just going to do a quick highlight. Which I'm failing at highlighting. Come back. Oh well. What I was going to highlight is in the upper right where it says register/sign in, and on the PDF icon where it says get access. So this is what you'll see if you're not coming in on the VPN. If you turn on the VPN and literally just hit refresh, looks like this. Brought to you by University of Toronto Libraries, download PDF. So I will say that the fastest, easiest, cleanest way to get stuff is off the VPN. So if you're trying to get a resource that seems blocked, I want you to stop. Like don't continue. Some of you, I think, have been contacting authors, which is an awesome way to network, but it's a little slow. So first option, use the VPN. Second option is you go in through libraryutoronto.ca, you rerun your search. So there's that extra friction, right? Because you've had to search twice. You can always ask on Discourse to see if there's a technique. And there are other sites on the web. Someone in a chat mentioned Sci-Hub, libgen.is. This is against copyright rules. This is against, some people would say, against the law. There are ethical questions, and you are in a pre-professional program. So we know that some of you are using them, otherwise you wouldn't have suggested we use them. If you're going to do that, we really do suggest, please do things properly. U of T is spending a lot of your tuition money on giving you access. Use the VPN. And with that, all of the prelude is done. We're about 20 minutes in. We are on to one-pagers. Professor Irish?
I'm here.
We're on to one-pagers.
Okay. Well, you're still controlling the slides, so
yeah, but you're telling me what to do. Forward.
So I'm just forward. Okay, so as you know, in the continuity plan, there was discussion of the one-pager. So next, and what we want to do today is really just kind of take you through that, talk you through it, help you understand what's going on there with what's required there. The assignment is actually posted, so if you want to look along at home, we're going to go into it right now. As Professor Foster has already noted, due to the unilateral decisions in other courses, we made a decision of our own to give you an extra day on the one-pager. Hopefully that takes some pressure off of you folks. If that was a wrong call, do let us know. We were trying to accommodate, make things work for you. So the one-pager really has two major goals. So the first goal is to provide a summary of the chosen concept for the project as it exists after beta. All right, so you've come through beta, you've had some good discussion with your teaching team. Hopefully as a team, you've had a chance to kind of do a bit of follow-up and say, wow, what happened there? How'd that go? And you can then choose a concept for the project. And then the second major goal, next highlight, is the idea that you're going to set out how you're going to move forward, what warrants, what's worth further investigation for the either detailed design or the verification. And you'll notice that with the word chosen in that first thing, there is a footnote. So if we just jump to that footnote now. So next slide. There we go. That footnote says, look, the way we're thinking of chosen, you're not really in a position to say this is what we would want to have as our final design. We've lost a week in the course, and so we're trying to accommodate for that with you. But what we want you to do is kind of what you think, and we acknowledge it may not have the kind of rigor that we would ideally hope for in praxis decision making, but you're going to need to make a decision about what you can work with and what you think is worthwhile to work with. So choose one that you think deserves some attention. And if you're struggling with that, as you may well be, the teaching team is going to help you identify that this week during your check-in. So a teaching team is preparing to do that. They probably have some ideas based on what they saw at beta. So, you should have your thoughts and bring them together with the teaching team, and they're going to try and help you work through that. All right, so that's kind of what the main goals are. Describe the chosen design and the steps on the way forward. Okay, so as we get into the objectives, describe that. And we're not looking for you to try and sell it, right? So this isn't a sales pitch. It isn't it isn't even trying to be the elevator pitch. This is just an attempt to say, okay, what is it? What are its features? What's important about the design? Okay, so that's kind of the main thing that we want to say about the describing of it. And then, if you came out of beta and said, oh, we really need to think about, and you did some further work, then incorporating any of that is a good thing to do. Particularly if you came out of beta and you still had 3 viable ideas that you were working with. So if you hadn't really narrowed down to one, if you still had a bunch of ideas on the table, then figuring out how to refine that down to one may be part of may become part of your one pager, showing us how that became the idea. Number 3 there is fairly straightforward, communicate clearly. So number 4, the additional set of investigations that you're going to consider as part of the final presentations. So that you're going to have these detailed design or verification presentations that you're going to create in some kind of a slides with voiceover format. What we're hoping you'll do here is, as a team, you'll set up the different investigations that you're going to do so that each person has their kind of place to drill down and go deeper, whether it's on a verification or is involved in a detailed design. Okay. All right. If you get into it and you realize, oh, this is no way I can do this. This is way beyond the possibility of what I have the resources or to do, or you discover that, oh, one simple Google search solved this and there's nothing else, so you discover it's trivial. My acknowledgement is that you may want to change after the one pager. All right. So the one pager is not locking you in. It's where you're intending to go as of 2400 on Sunday, but it doesn't actually commit you and lock you in. So if things do change in the week after that, that's cool. We can work with that, and teaching team can support you in that as well. Okay, so those are the basic objectives of the assignment. Don't want to really dwell a whole lot on the constraints and criteria, but just so you kind of know they're there. I suppose the one constraint I should talk about is number 3, which is the should. Our hope is that as a team, you'll do some combination of detailed design and verification, but we acknowledge that is going to depend a bit on where your team is, what resources you have, and the nature of the project, right? So we're acknowledging that. That's why it's a should, not a must, just because we know that some teams and some projects and some design concepts, you may not be able to do both of those. So in our ideal world, you would have some combination of that between the members of the team, but total reality check that it may or may not work. Okay. All right, so we can move on. The next one just has the criteria, which should look fairly straightforward. There are all kinds of things you've seen before, so don't really want to dwell much on that. what I'd like to do is I'd like to get into some examples, and we can see what's happening. So this is one from last year. So last year, as part of the showcase, students did do a one-pager as well. So there are some samples that you're going to see in the next few slides, but you are obviously at a little different stage of the design process, right? You're not as far along as they would be. So in reality check, you're about kind of 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks behind where they would be when they did this work. All right, so if I can have the next one, Foster, next slide. So just zooming in and saying, okay, what is this team doing? You'll notice this one is fairly text heavy. And so this team begins with a kind of, they have this where is human error. What are they doing? At that point, they're actually reframing the RFP. So in just a couple of sentences, 3 sentences, they're able to reframe the RFP and set up how they are interpreting and what they see as being the way the problem gets identified. And then if you look down below, they then say, hey, here's the claim they're making about the design. What is their design? It's an improved analog board in the short term and a digitized entry board in the long term. So they're kind of making the claim of what their design is. So this is what they're going to go on to talk about. All right, so if we just take the next one and scroll down the page there, you can see they set out a set of bullet point objectives. Right, so trying to make this thing fairly quick and fairly readable for an audience who can come and look at it. And then if the next one is just a couple of different iterations of the prototype, right? They're short term, here's a better whiteboard way to work, and their long term, which is became an iPad digitized way of working. So, and then on the back side, they give some details about the design, right? So just bullet points on the details and giving the explanations of what each of those things do in a fairly quick way here. But I would note that in the first case, they critique it. Yeah, next slide, I think, or next action. So one of your possibilities for your final presentation, right? So these are detailed design, and then talking about the various detailed design decisions. Any one of those could become the thing that somebody drills down into to create the detailed design presentation. So they're all there. We can see those things already in play. If we just scroll down one more on this one, I think. Because the other thing they do is they show us a little bit of their verification work, right? So they've got this critical test, what they were aiming for, particularly in this case, they were aiming for accuracy over with number of tasks over time. And so they have that. And then that then suggests, hey, that's verification work. Depending on what your project is, depending on what your resources are, that could be a way that you could be moving forward in terms of verification, right? So 2 different kind of things that you can see already embedded in that one. Similarly with yours, you can see that. Okay, so all right, let's look at another. This team did a one-sided one-pager. We'll just zoom in a bit on the kind of description of features that they have there. And you can see they've done this. So this is a design which was aimed to get badminton birdies into stacks in a way that doesn't involve people manually stacking them up. So they created basically a shaker that puts it in place, and each of those features would represent, again, a detailed design decision that could be drilled down and could be dug into to find what would be the best way to do it. Some of that might be just simply sourcing what servo motor, how big a servo motor, all that kind of thing. Some of it could involve some other aspects of working on it. Okay, so again, identifying detailed design, drilling down, trying to decide what we're going to do with it. Okay, so in this sense, you maybe, if you were working on a design like this one, you might actually go further than this team does, because this team identified servo motor. You might actually get to a point of identifying which servo motor and how much, how much it is, how what it's going to accomplish, right? So it's going to depend a lot on projects. Okay, so next one, we're going to look at one more. All right. So yeah, so zoom in on this one. This one was designed as a trifold, right? So it's a little hard to look at as a flat sheet, but it's designed to be a two-sided trifold. This is going back to the dementia RFP that we have looked at a couple of times in this course. And in fact, this is the team, Ryan Zazo from this team came into class and talked a bit about their design. They were the ones who, remember, we had the class where there was the team that came in with the null hypothesis, the team that came in with the choose your own adventure, and the team that came in with the solution. All right, so this is from the team that came in with the solution. All right, so what are they doing? They identify, really that's just restating the RFP they do as the first thing. So a lot of that context was already there. They didn't have to do a lot of work on dementia at this point, or on the Fairview Nursing Home, but they wanted to set a background so that anybody could look at the one pager and know what was going on. I think that's still appropriate for you folks, is that you want to be sure that you're setting it up so that everybody knows what's going on. Okay. And then as we move on, we see that what they're doing here is they're saying, hey, but we are choosing a focus. And so it says framing there, can bring in the box there. They're focusing in on the staff, right? So they are not just saying we're going to focus on the patients or we're going to focus on the rooms. They're choosing an approach, and they're expressing what their approach is that they're focusing on the staff. So that becomes their way of moving that forward is to say we're going to focus on the staff. Okay, the next one. And then they're setting up an objective. Okay, so once they've got the staff, then they have an objective. So there's a question there in Mattermost. What does the teaching team think about the density of the trifold? So this is trifold is using a combination of visuals and graphic elements. The size of the font when you print it out on an 8.5 by 11, I think is about an 11 or 10 point font. So I wouldn't really want you to go any smaller there in terms of font sizes. Beyond that, it's a choice of what font you want to use. So this one has a reasonable amount of text. I'm not worried about that. We did see some last year that had huge mounds of text. I kind of like the trifold better personally, just because I like the visual element of it. And they're trying to break it up, and you see here that they have created their sort of 6 major pieces that they want you to think about. And really, any one of these, so bringing the call out there, Foster.
Yep.
So any one of those involves a bunch of detailed design decisions, right? So you could drill down at any point and say, our computer receives the data from the Wi-Fi chip, computes distances and coordinates, then sends a notification to a user-friendly app if an unwanted entry is made, right? So there's a whole set of design decisions right there in number 4. And if you had the capacities at home, right, depending on what I know home involves all kinds of different capacities for people, but if you had some of those capabilities, you could drill down in any one of those. You could set up a verification test to see if you can make the Wi-Fi signal do what it's supposed to do. So there's a realm of possibilities there that you could be working with. And again, it's going to depend very much on what kinds of resources and what kind of materials and so on you have at home. All right. So now, at that point, I'm kind of saying, hey, let's open it back up to you folks and say, do you have questions about the one pager now? Do those few samples give you something to work with, to run with, or do big questions remain? And so yeah, we'll just give you a minute to hammer in your questions into Mattermost or wherever you're entering things. Or frankly, if you want to go voice, you can raise your hand and collaborate and join a conversation. That's a great question. Mingdi asks the question, the samples from previous years have the RFP restatement section. Should we be trying to do that? You are still reframing or restating the RFP. So yeah, I do think you still want to be doing that. That gives, that allows you to set up your design thinking and your design work as part of that reframing. So that seems to be a good question, and one that makes sense to have. Yeah. Well, okay. So Daniel asks if the restate equals a reframe, do we still need to include that? I think the point would be that the reframing is what you then want to include. So you don't need to go back to the RFP that you have then reframed. You explain your framing. So that's a good clarification. So to what extent do we discuss design process? I would say not really much here. The point here is to talk about where you've got to as end point. So that process stuff is going to come in really in the detailed design decision piece, and in your handbook is a great place to talk lots about your process for the win. So on Mattermost, Leongda asked the question about with the firefighting team, the ideal solution involves some sort of combination of electronics. Are we expected to build a prototype to the degree of complexity for our ideal solution, with i.e. with the complex software, etc.? The answer to that is actually no. What you're expected to do is to work from where you reached with beta, and then go into detail design from there. Now, if you are, if as a team you say, hey, the really interesting set of details would be all around the programming, all around the setting up of that software, and you want to kind of take that and divide that across your team and say, let's each do pieces of this. That could be really cool. So there's nothing that says you can't make that part of your detailed design development, but there's not the expectation that you're going to do that. So how detailed of a reframing section do you want, is being asked. Great question. And I would say, if you look at those, they were doing all of that sort of talking about the RFP, talking about the reframing, generally in a couple or three sentences, right? So it's a very brief piece. You want to get on to talk about what you're doing. But in order to talk about what you're doing, that bit of context is, you're doing it in the framework of this RFP, or this RFP as you've reframed it. All right, so in one page, constraint number 1, it says present present one chosen design through detailed design or verification For detailed design, I'm a bit confused about how and to what extent detailed design can support our statement that the design we chose is currently the best with limited verification test results. All right. So generally, if we had an uninterrupted semester, what would have happened in these last few weeks is after beta, you would have chosen a few details to dig into. And by digging into those details, you would have found out whether your design was one you could recommend. Okay? So we've pulled back a little from that. We're saying you don't need to get to the stage saying, can we integrate these things so that we know that we can recommend? You need to just get to the point where you can say, I have dug into the detail and I understand what its implication is. Okay? So in that sense, we're acknowledging that given our timelines and given the challenges, we're not going to get as far this semester as would normally happen in practice. But we are taking it into that next stage. So you can't really do verification until you've got some details. And you can't really get all the details until you've done some verification. So these things happen kind of working back and forth between them hand in hand. Does that seem like a good answer there, Professor Foster? Or do you want to add in on that?
I just
Actually,
want to
can I
come
jump
in, Professor Sheridan.
I just want to key in on the word best in that question. And it was something that we were very careful about in the crafting of the assignment, is that the word best or better is not actually in the assignment. It's chosen design. And that's because we acknowledge, like Professor Irish was saying, that interconnection is likely not going to happen in this context. So whichever one you have that you are going to continue your detailed design or verification on may not be the best. Your results may find out that it was not an ideal design, and that's okay if that's the result that comes out of it. Foster?
What you said.
All right, thanks. Good catch, both of you. All right. Question seems to be slowing down. Does that mean we've got you covered? You're feeling like you have answers to those questions? Someone did ask if these answers are being captured, and Mr. Foster says he'll add this into the download site so that if you want to refer back to the questions.
I think you want to we want to get the last one in, the one that just came in.
Just want just if you clarify what you're looking for with respect to holistic explanation. Do you mean the broad, high-level explanation of the concept and how it integrates into the design problem, as opposed to the specific mathematical reasons why it is the chosen concept? Did you have an answer for that one right off the top there, Foster? I need to think for a sec.
So my answer would be, when we say like a holistic explanation, one way of thinking about holistic is that it speaks to the overall concept as opposed to the specific elements of it, which is kind of a tautology. So you can think about it more like in terms of abstraction and in terms of the number of elements in the description. So a holistic description of a chosen design, again, I'll use bridges again, saying cable stay is pretty, it's pretty abstract, but it still lets you know, oh, I'm going to expect to see some verticals, I'm going to expect to see some fans of cabling, and I'm going to expect to see a bed, I think is the term. So when we say holistic, we're trying to say, given that description, can I start to anticipate, in a sense, can I use that holistic description to anticipate what some of the more detailed elements are going to be? So I think your point to Tala, who asked the question, do you mean the broad high-level explanation of the concept? Yep. How it integrates into the problem? Yep. Why it's the chosen concept? I don't even think you necessarily need to have that from the point of view that when I hear, why did you choose it? Usually I'd expect to see alternatives in some kind of comparison, whereas saying, this is the high-level concept we're going with. Why? Because we are, which again, by practice standards is pretty thin. Given that we've gone with this because it enables, as Professor Irish was saying, it enables us to actually do the tests and the detailed decisions that we would normally use to be super confident in it. So what we're kind of doing is we're saying, we want you to go from high level concept to very specific things when normally there would be kind of a middle zone. Oh, and we just hit 14 hours. Tala, does that answer? If you can ping. It is 14 hours, that is true. Is it just me, or does it feel like we're Frankensteining the best of a morph chart for the one pager? Yes, except I don't think you need to put the alternatives into the one pager. The alternatives come out later. But yes, yes, the idea, you're setting up, here you go, super fast. You're setting up the rows of the morph, but the actual filling in of those rows happens later. And clear.